Hi, Nolan. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. So would you like to introduce yourself for everyone watching on Facebook?
Sure. My name is Nolan Valier. I'm a PhD candidate in musicology. I joined the Seuss Archives back in 2013 and worked here as a graduate assistant from 2013 until 2018. I've taken a couple of years off and then I'm coming back this semester and next, hopefully, to work a little bit at SUSE again. And PhD, like I said, PhD candidate in musicology, and I'm working currently on musical communities, soundscapes, and architectural spaces in the Midwest. It's my subject area.
That's very exciting. Are you still doing your work with some of those new music groups in Chicago, or?
Yeah, that's one chapter of the dissertation I'm doing. So that one chapter that you're referencing, looking at New Music Chicago, it was an organization in the 1980s that was established on the near north side of the city, and their performances within particular architectural spaces. That's one chapter. Other chapters, I'm looking at music and Taliesin in Wisconsin and in Arizona. Those are two architectural sites that were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and Taliesin School of Architecture, which was his architectural school that he founded back in the 1930s, early 1930s, in the height of the Depression. Actually staged public concerts
That's very
in
interesting.
and most of the architects, as part of their educational regimen, were asked to play instruments, music instruments, and actually did small group chamber ensembles as part of their curriculum in architecture. So I'm doing a chapter on that, chapter on Bruce Goff and John Garvey House here in the city of Urbana. It's a
Cool.
round house, completely round in shape, where the center of the home is a sunken living room that Goff was known for, that actually contained a stage for performance. And it was initially designed for the violist John Garvey, who was a member of the Walden String Quartet here on campus.
Oh yeah.
And then Salvatore Martorano began renting the home from him back in 1964. And during that time, he staged a series of concerts called Concerts at the Roundhouse, which featured all sorts of avant-garde music and new music. Mostly composers associated with the state of Illinois, but also international avant-garde names like Pauline Oliveros had a premiere at Concerts at the Roundhouse. So it's both of them, both Goff and Wright, are sort of associated with the organic style of architecture. Early it was called the prairie style, but then evolved into become sort of organic architecture. And I'm looking at specifically prairie style and organic spaces, and the juxtaposition of modern and non-modern, anti-modern musics that are occurring within those spaces.
Well, that sounds very interesting, and it's very cool that there's that local connection with a place that's actually in Urbana,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and some names that, of course, appear at the SUSE archives and our
mm-hmm.
collections. So that's fun too. So would you like to share what you're working on kind of right now at SUSE?
Sure. So in the past and currently, I've been in the past. I've worked on exhibits and creation of museum exhibits around Susa, and um, done exhibits on Harry Partch, on John Philip Sousa, on the Bomer Krill Women's Symphony Orchestra, and several other trombones in the Sousa band, several other exhibit scripts that I've written. And this year we're working on sort of an exhibit on Hawaiian slide guitars. You wouldn't know it, but the Sousa Archives in the middle of Illinois has one of the largest collections of Hawaiian slide guitars in the country, and some major names within the Hawaiian slide guitar community, including Eddie Alkire and Latricia Candle, who was a Hawaiian slide guitar performer in the city of Chicago back in the 1930s. We have both of those collections here, and we're drawing on those collections plus some minor collections that we have within Musical Americana and a few others around the archive. So we're not quite sure exactly what the exhibit will look like at this point. Throwing out ideas on Hawaiian slide guitar and mail-in education, which is sort of kind of similar to how people are learning currently with Zoom and Skype and in sort of a virtual learning environment. We thought, well, mail-in learning teachers were happening back in the 1930s and 40s with Eddie Alkire. We could make a parallel between those two and what's happening currently.
Yeah, that sounds very relevant to what's
yeah.
happening now.
So we're considering that. We're also considering technological innovation in terms of the innovations that both Alkire and Candle made to the development of the slide guitar. So Alkire has an instrument that he calls the A harp, harp, but A harp, pronounced A harp, that was produced, was one of the first sort of electronic slide guitars that was produced back in the 1930s and 40s. He has a patent for it that many other companies tried to copy based on his designs. And then Candle has a guitar called the Grand Latar, which was a multi-neck slide guitar with electronic light display on the front that has a very unique tuning structure. And the tuning structure for any guitarist who is watching the open string tuning was set into 5 sets of tunings. So one is A, C sharp, E, A, C sharp, E. The second is B, E, D, G sharp, B, E. The third is A, C, E, A, C, E. The fourth is F, A, C sharp, F. And the fifth is F sharp, A, C, E. This was an innovative tuning system that many people ended up copying in the 1940s and into the 1950s when stringing their slide guitars and arranging their slide guitars. So she's really on the forefront of technological innovation. Candle was, as was Eddie Alkire. So we're kind of bouncing back and forth between these two concepts, technological innovation and education when it comes to learning Hawaiian slide guitar.
And we have the Grand Latar at Sousa, right? That's one of our. Is that our more recent acquisition, or is it
we
the
have the Grand Latar?
Mm-hmm.
The small Latar is the more recent acquisition. And the Grand Latar, I was actually on the trip when we initially acquired it, and I was asked to come along because it weighs about 300 pounds. So we had to lift it up into the van and take it ourselves. So yeah, it's we have the Grand Latar, and then we also have the small Latar. There are 2 separate designs. One is a double neck, and the other one has essentially 5 necks on the design of the instrument.
Yeah, and we don't have those for you now, but later when Nolan is finished with these exhibits and we're putting content out, we'll be sure to share those instruments with you because they are very cool and great examples of technological innovation. So did you have stuff that you wanted to show us today, Nolan?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. And actually, I didn't grab a pair of gloves, so I need to grab a pair of gloves really quickly here. Sorry.
No problem. You can see our supply cabinets. This is where we keep all of our archival gear, like the gloves that Nolan is grabbing, so that we don't end up accidentally damaging any of our materials.
And mostly for the photographs. So this is fingers leave residue on the photographs that we don't want because it can actually damage the items. So a couple of things that we have that I'd like to show today. So this is an item from Popular Mechanics, and it's one of the first sort of ads for a mail order Hawaiian slide guitar method. It says, quickly learn to play Hawaiian guitar. Play it like this native. Free $18 Hawaiian guitar when you enroll. And so there's all sorts of little issues that we need to sort of encounter within an exhibit like this. So issues of authenticity, issues of race and identity that an ad like this brings up. So not only do you get to see what people were initially playing as a slide guitar, which looks very much like your regular acoustic guitar, but we're also seeing some language on this particular ad that we kind of need to problematize and think through. And I think the archive is one of those places that we can talk through these concepts. So this is a really interesting and problematic advertisement that we have to sort of consider, especially since both Alkire and Candlewood have engaged in this type of learning, this sort of mail-in learning in terms of studying and learning the guitar for the first time themselves. So this dates from about 1920. That's about the time frame that we're looking at for that. So some other things that I found interesting. This is another advertisement, and we're not quite sure where this is coming from. If this is a journal that just somebody collected. It's likely some sort of journal, but there's no marker on anything to say where it's coming from or what the date is actually. But the really interesting thing, this is around 1955, sometime around then is what the best guess that we've got. But there were all sorts of slide guitar ensembles from the time period that slide guitar was incredibly popular in the early 1950s, and we have ensembles like this one. And as you can see in the image, we have 3 different styles of Hawaiian slide guitar. These are all A harps that are being performed within this ensemble. And they're all very, very young students. This is an ensemble called the Shornock Conservatory of Music, which was being led by John G. Shornock of Toledo, Ohio. And just as we said, it's they're playing all on Alkire instruments and are advertising for Alkire's company, his A-harp instrument that he would have sold at the time. And it's a fascinating image for the sheer number of styles of instruments, and for the fact that this was an educational ensemble that we're dealing with. So this is part of what I was talking about, this sort of mail order educational course. Right here, we have Eddie Alkire's mail-in course that one could enroll in. Send money to me, and I'll send you a little flyer on how to play the guitar. I'll teach you all your scales. I'll teach you all your arpeggios, and there'll be little sort of nuanced statements about how do we go about the tuning, and how do we slide in a particular moment. So it was as if they were conducting a one-on-one lesson, but through the mail. And so we've got sort of here Eddie Alkire's artist course for Hawaiian steel guitar, Eddie Alkire Publications. This is a really young Eddie in this image, copyright 1939. So this is when he's first starting this type of mail-in course that we have.
And would those mail-in courses, would they be personalized at all? Or would it be just kind of the same information by rote?
Yep, generic information by rote, and that's how he made a lot of money. Is everybody gets the same mail-in, and everybody starts from square one unless you know a little bit, and you can say, "Hey, I can test out of this already." There was all sorts of little tester fill in the bubbles, so you have to sort of rate yourself in terms of your musical abilities, and then send that back to Eddie, and then Eddie would send you then the appropriate method book for that particular month. We're now on lesson number 17, and you've made it to year 2, lesson 3. That's his system. So everybody is essentially starting from square one unless you have a little bit of musical background.
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially thinking about how we're doing distant learning today.
Mm-hmm. So this is an image of Miss Candle and the small litar. And this is one that we'll be using within the exhibit. Candle came from a sort of middle-class family outside of the city of Chicago, a very devoutly religious individual throughout her life, and was fortunate enough to join an ensemble called the Kohala Girls, who presented a number of concerts on radio stations around the city, and she sort of gained some international fame from that. Was asked by Paul Whiteman to create sort of the background music to his radio hours in Chicago that were being broadcast at the time. And so she has several weeks of working with the Paul Whiteman Ensemble, and then ended up running in the early 1940s the Chicago Plectrophonic Orchestra, that she was the conductor, initially the soloist for the ensemble, and then became the conductor for the ensemble starting around 1942. It was right about 1942 that she became the conductor. And soon after, she ran the ensemble until 1946 or 1947, and then left music to raise her family. And so for a long time, guitarists who were interested in Hawaiian slide guitar knew of this sort of mystic figure of Latricia Candle, but they didn't know, where to find her, where to find her instruments, where to find any information on her. She has been raising her family in Chicago since then, and just passed a few years ago, but she thankfully gave her materials to one of our donors, and he gave the materials to the archive. So now we have access to it. We know what Latricia did throughout her life. This is the Kohala Girls. I got an image of the grand litar as well.
Great.
This is the Kohala Girls. They had a dancer, and several of the women played slide guitar. Look, Candle right here is right here in the image. She's right in the center of the image, and actually arranged most of their materials. So most of the concert programs that we have of the Kohala Girls were popular tunes, jazz tunes, Spanish tunes, classical tunes that were arranged for Hawaiian slide guitar ensemble by Miss Candle. And it's, she was brilliant in terms of her musical output. This is a image of her with Paul Whiteman, who's known most in the musical world for the Paul Whiteman Jazz Orchestra, and they are the ensemble that premiered Rhapsody in Blue, if you know this piece, and was in the 1930s a phenomenal radio performer and orchestrator, and worked fairly closely with Gershwin and other famous American composers at the time. Another person who was associated with the Whiteman Ensemble was Ferd Graffé, whose Grand Canyon Suite is sort of much of the background to the movie A Christmas Story. If you've ever seen that, that's Ferd Graffé, who was a member of the Paul Whiteman Orchestra at the time. So we have Miss Candle with Paul Whiteman, and this is an image of the grand litar. And the last one that I was going to show you today, so this is another early method book, which dates here from 1928. So this is before both Al Kyer and Candle would have been running their
Mhm.
courses. Candle ran lessons out of her home in Chicago. She lived in sort of the Austin community outside of the city, and ran her lessons out of her home there, but then also had a studio off of, I think, Dearborn Ave, but I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And just as I said, with Al Kyer, he did it these sort of mail-in courses. But in the 1920s, you could also purchase method books. So this is the Kamiki Hawaiian guitar method. And oftentimes they have very exoticized images of Hawaiian peoples to sort of entice potential buyers. Don't you want to sound Hawaiian too? This is the sort of approach that many of the method book companies, these, in this case, this is William J. Smith Music Co. That's producing this in order to entice people to buy the the method book itself. Very fascinating images. On the inside, it's very plain, normal music, sheet music. There's not a whole lot to it, but the outside, on the other hand, is where it's about. Okay.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
We've got more material to come. Al Kyer, I'm just now looking through that material, so I should be finding specific items that I want to display as part of the this year's American Music Month, which will deal in some capacity with Hawaiian slide guitars, whether that be education or technology. We're not quite sure yet, but the Al Kyer stuff is yet to come. Right now, we've got the candle items picked and chosen. The instruments will be yet to come. We should have instruments both by Al Kyer and both the grand latar and the small latar in our this year's American Music Month.
Yeah, this all sounds great. And I know I'm excited to do some more, videos of some of these instruments and materials, and we'll be sharing them with you on our Facebook and on Twitter. So if you haven't yet, be sure to follow us so that you can see those coming up in the next few months when we get this exhibit more in progress and then complete. So thanks again, Nolan, for sharing these with us today and talking with everyone.
Yeah, no problem.